H.P. Lovecraft is well known for his tales of cosmic horror, monstrous and unknowable creatures that are too terrifying for the human mind to grasp. In The Rats in the Walls, our protagonist Delapore finds that human depravity can rival even the most terrifying Lovecraftian creatures. The year is 1923, and Delapore is finally ready to move into his ancestral home. The mansion, named Exham Priory, is newly renovated after a huge investment. Centuries ago, the Delapores had lived there as barons, but a tragic event had all but wiped them out. Baron Delapore, 5 children, and several servants were discovered dead. Only one sibling, Walter, had survived, and he was immediately suspected in their deaths. While nothing was ever proven, he denied his inheritance of Exham and fled to America. This surviving son, last of the Delapore line, started a family in Virginia and changed his name to Delapore. However, the family's fortunes would only continue to be cursed. During the Civil War, their Virginia home was burned to the ground. Delapore's grandfather died in the fire, and any trace of his Exham inheritance burned with him. Years later, while Delapore's son was serving in Europe during the Great War, he had heard stories of his cursed family from his friend, Captain Norris. He relayed them back to his father in letters home. Now aware of what his family had left behind, Delapore was determined to take back his birthright and have it be brought back to its original glory. Unfortunately, he was delayed when his son came home severely wounded from the war. It took 2 years to care for him, abandoning both his business and his dreams for Exham, until his boy finally passed away from his injuries. Exham had sat abandoned for years. Only architecture enthusiasts had visited as tourists, and the locals continued to avoid the crumbling towers, just like they did when the Delapores had lived there. Norris, the man who had originally told Delapore's son of the stories of the mansion, was especially fond of the boy. He met Delapore when they arrived in town and helped him purchase and gather materials for the restoration. The villagers wanted nothing to do with Exham or Delapore himself, so the pair were forced to buy outside of town. Still curious as to why the locals hated the place so much, Delapore managed to vaguely piece together this history of Exham. The intimidating structure was built on the edge of a towering cliff overlooking the sea. In prehistoric times, it was home to a druidic temple where dark rituals were performed. Exham had stood throughout Roman, Saxon, and Danish control. Later, a group of monks practicing dark magic settled there and established the priory. Hundreds of years after that, Henry III granted the place to Gilbert de la Poer, Delapore's ancestor. Before taking the priory as their own, there was nothing especially peculiar about the Delapore family. But shortly after inheriting the priory, they began to be referenced as cursed, and the villagers began to fear them as demons. Horrible rumors spread about the family, about villagers gone missing and never being heard from again, about screams emanating from the building. about servants gone mad by only taking a glimpse of what was inside. He learned that the most feared de la Pours were the leaders of the family and their direct heirs, presided over a cult that formed in the family. This inner circle was so impenetrable that if the heir to the family did not agree to lead this inner circle, they would vanish or die under mysterious circumstances. Some of these crimes were even absolved and blessed by the church once the priest had heard the confessions from the killers. Despite these annoyances, Delapour pushed on for 2 years, encouraged by Norris and the other historians that praised him for reclaiming these lost artifacts. He was dead set on reclaiming his ancestors' seat and permanently fixing the reputation of his family. Finally finished with the reconstruction after 2 years, Delapour permanently moved in along with 7 servants and 9 cats. Over the first week, he pored over family history to find what was lost in that envelope that burned back in Virginia. Found that though Walter was strongly suspected of murdering most of his family, the crime was largely accepted by the villagers and mostly ignored. The murders seemed to have come directly after Walter had made a shocking, but mostly undisclosed discovery about his family. Though the official reasoning was not released, it was claimed that he was let free because he had cleansed the house of a long-standing curse. Unlike the rest of his family, he was seen as an honorable man by both the law and the locals. After Delapour's first week of settling into his new home, he began to notice some strange things. None of these incidents were alone enough to scare him, but together they made him uneasy. One of his cats, who he knew well, began to act strangely, constantly on alert and pacing from room to room, unable to relax. The next day, a servant reported that the other 8 cats were also experiencing similar restlessness. The servant suggested that maybe rats or mice had made their way into the walls, but Delapour could hardly believe that, since there hadn't been rats in the building for hundreds of years. Even the local field mice seemed to stay far away from the building. He consulted with Norris, who agreed that it would be extremely unlikely for vermin to have made their way in so quickly. That night, as Delapour went to sleep with one of his cats laying at the foot of the bed, he was assaulted with strange dreams. Late in the night, these dreams were suddenly interrupted by his cat jumping up, staring straight at a certain spot in the wall. Unlike the day before, this time Delapour could also hear some faint scratching and scurrying behind the wall in front of him. The cat jumped out of bed and tried to climb the wall to get to the source of the scratching, bringing down a tapestry that exposed an old stone wall. Despite the cat scratching at the base of the wall, nothing could be found, and eventually they gave up for the night. Next day, Delapour found that he was the only person to hear the strange scratching in the night, though the cook did note that the cat in his room had a similar response. He called on Norris, who was equally confused, and let him mount traps and poison to try to catch the pests. That night, Delapour was assaulted with even worse dreams. He dreamt he was gazing into a gigantic grotto filled with disgusting creatures being led by a bearded shepherd. As they walked, rats began pouring in from above, eventually engulfing both the shepherd and the flock. He awoke from this nightmare into another, as the walls of his bedroom echoed loudly with the sounds of scurrying rodents. Turning on the lights, he saw nothing unusual other than the sprung rat traps, though they didn't hold any dead animals. He got out of bed and made his way into his study, descending the spiral staircase that was alive with the sounds of thousands of tiny scampering feet. It was as if all of them were heading towards the same unknown destination. He met two servants in the hallway who had been investigating the cause of the cat's panic, though they could not hear the rats themselves. The cats had all gathered at a locked door to an old cellar and were all sitting and yowling for the door to open. Delapore began to show the servants the location of the noise, but as soon as he had, the noise stopped and the cats dispersed. He checked the rest of the traps, and similar to the one in his room, they were all sprung, but also all empty. He decided to explore the cellar in the morning. The next morning, he phoned Norris, who came over and helped explore the cellar. Though they were both interested in the Roman-built vault, they did not find any source of the previous night's havoc. They did, however, find an altar set in the middle of the room, along with some Roman writing that referenced the old gods. Out of ideas, Delapore and Norris decided to spend the night in the cellar to see if the massive vermin migration would repeat itself again. Delapore's dreams that night were almost identical to the previous, with the same herds of abominations pacing through the muck of this gigantic grotto. He awoke with a scream, which was met by a kind laugh from Norris, who had yet to sleep. Later, he was awoken again, this time shaken awake by Norris. It seemed the cats had again begun to fixate on the walls, though Norris still didn't hear the torrential sounds that Delapore was hearing. They still seemed to be crawling just inside the walls, which was strange, since the walls were supposed to be solid stone blocks. He began to attempt to convince Norris of the insane things he was hearing, but it wasn't as difficult to convince him as he thought it would be. Instead, Norris believed him immediately and attempted to find the source that the cats were searching for. They found nothing other than a draft coming from underneath one of the stone walls that made the lantern slightly flicker. Both extremely disturbed, they spent the rest of the night nervously going over what happened in a well-lit room. The pair decided to go to London to gather a team, an assortment of scientists and explorers that were experts in this type of archaeology and willing to explore such an old and disturbing place. Delapore found that these men had a similar reaction to Norris, intense sympathy and interest, as opposed to the skepticism he had expected. Upon returning to Exham, they both found there hadn't been any more excitement since they left. The servants heard nothing, the cats had relaxed, and the traps were not sprung. Delapore retired early and immediately dove into the same horrifying nightmares of the shepherd and the flock. Other than these nightmares, nothing else was out of the ordinary when he awoke the next morning. Later that morning, the 7 explorers gathered and headed down to the cellar where Delapore and Norris had spent the night a week earlier. They focused on the central altar that had confused the two men the week before. Luckily, one of the hired explorers, Sir William Brinton, was able to activate it, causing it to tilt backwards. This revealed the first of their horrors, a flight of stairs that descended into the abyss. The stairs were scattered with large quantities of human bones. The steps were so worn down from what seemed to be millennia of use that the center of them was barely more than a ramp. Upon further inspection, the skulls mixed in with the bones were only human-like, or akin to Neanderthals or apes. As the group began to descend, they noticed several subtle but alarming things. Sir William noted that the way the passage was carved must have been created from below. Similarly, as they walked, they noticed a breeze in their faces. Not a rush of damp, murky air like you'd expect from a cave, but cool, fresh air that should come from the outdoors. Further down, they began to see light, not candle or torchlight or glowing cave creatures, but true daylight. Finally, they came out of the staircase, and what the group saw sent them into disarray. One man fainted. Norris sent out a cry of gibberish. Delabor simply gasped. Sir William again was the only one to stay steadfast and continued to lead the party from the front. What opened before them was the slightly lit grotto from the nightmares that had repeatedly haunted Delapore. The vast expanse seemed to stretch so far that they could not find where it ended. On the ground, they found buildings of various eras: Roman, Saxon, English. Leading to these buildings was an ocean of bones and skulls, covering the ground everywhere they looked. Some decayed completely over centuries, while others remained fresh, revealing the creature's final pose. Upon further examination of the skeletons, it seemed like some of them had devolved into walking on four legs like an animal. As they continued further from the stairs, they found huge pens that had held these grotesque beings. They seemed to have been fed with the vegetables that had grown in the priory gardens for centuries, as they found the deep vats full of the rotten remains. Deeper into the cavern, Norris discovered an English-looking building. It appeared to be a butcher shop and kitchen for harvesting the herds. Delapore entered a Saxon house, which was fashioned into a small jail with rows of cells filled with very human skeletons. Walking down the rows, he found one skeleton with a ring. That ring bore the coat of arms of the De La Pours. Suddenly, it was not a mystery what had happened to the would-be heirs that were not willing to be a part of the inner cult. Soon, the events of Exham became obvious to everyone. When the De La Pours were murdered and the last one fled to America, the caverns below stopped being stocked with food. With nowhere to go, the waves of rats began to descend on the herds of subhumans, wiping them out in grimy agony. When the herds were finally depleted, the rats had nowhere else to go, and they pushed their way through into the priory above. This realization pushes the group over the edge, particularly Delapore, who can no longer stomach what his family line truly had done. He started running into the dark abyss ahead, leading him, that they would guide him to find the mad god Nyarlathotep. Lovecraft writes Delapore's final descent into complete madness with the following passage. My searchlight expired, but I still ran. I heard voices and yowls and echoes, but above all there gently rose that impious, insidious scurrying, gently rising as a stiff, bloated corpse gently rises above an oily river that flows under endless onyx bridges to a black, putrid sea. Something bumped into me, something soft and plump. It must have been the rats, the vicious, gelatinous, ravenous army that feasts on the dead and the living. Why shouldn't rats eat a Delapore, as a Delapore eats forbidden things? The war ate my boy, damn them all. And the Yanks ate Carfax with flames and burnt grandsire Delapore. And the secret? No, I tell you, I'm not that demon swineherd in that twilight grotto. It was not Edward Norris's fat face on that flabby fungus thing. Who says I'm a Delapore? He lived, but my boy died. Shall a Norris hold the lands of a Delapore? It's voodoo, I tell you. That spotted snake. Curse you, Thornton. Teach you to faint at what my family do? Sblood, thou stinker. I'll learn thee how to gust. Wold ye swing me thick horse. Magna Mater. Atis. Diad agus had iodan. Argus bastandus ort. Donas diroras ort. Argus liatus. Mongol. Art. 3 hours later, the others finally found him. He was mumbling gibberish and hovering over the partially eaten body. The body that belonged to his friend Norris. The days after, Delapore was sent to an asylum, and Exham was demolished. After running into the darkness, he doesn't seem to recall anything. However, he's accused of doing impossible things to Norris. It must have been the rats. They must know it was the rats. Slithering, scurrying rats whose scampering will never let me sleep. The demon rats that race behind the padding in this room and beckon me down to greater horrors than I have ever known. The rats they can never hear. The rats in the walls.